with COVID, the discussion of mandatory vaccinations has kind of really skyrocketed over the past little while. And, it's left a lot of people wondering, like, what is going to happen with this? And I wanted to kind of have a bit of a conversation around this that kind of brings in to the equation some things that I think we should really start to talk about more directly. And this whole thing's going to center off an article here that I'm going to show you called "Don't Want the COVID-19 Vaccine? You Could Lose Access to Normal Life," says UK minister. So before we get into the contents of this article, essentially there's been this discussion that, hey, governments may not make the vaccine mandatory for COVID, but, people kind of suspected as much as like 8-9 months ago, as we reported as well, that it was most likely going to be the case that, like, they were going to start to say, well, you can't fly, or, you can't go here, or maybe you can't go to the grocery store, or something to that effect, right? We saw Ticketmaster playing with the idea that they were going to try and get people to either provide a negative COVID test or a proof of vaccination if people want to attend concerts. And, that didn't go over too well for a group of people. And then for another group of people, it's like, yeah, great, why not? Why wouldn't we want to keep everybody safe? And that's an important point that we're going to come back to. But with this particular article, where it goes is people who refuse a vaccine for COVID-19 could find normal life curtailed as restaurants, bars, cinemas, and sports venues could block entry for those who don't have proof that they're inoculated, Britain's new vaccine minister said on Monday. Then we can go down to this section here where asked if the UK would introduce an immunity passport, Zahawi said a person's COVID-19 vaccine status might be included in a phone app similar to the Test and Trace app used by the National Health Service that would inform local doctors of a person's status. And then the quote here says, I think you'd probably find that restaurants and bars and cinemas and other venues, sports venues, will probably also use that system as they've done with the Test and Trace app. So essentially what you're seeing here is this idea that it's like, okay, we're going to start to track people, right? Again, like it's been long discussed. And yeah, maybe it won't be what people kind of thought it would be right away, which was, some sort of readable, updatable microchip that lasts, for several years underneath the skin that might be, put in through some sort of needle or even with the vaccine itself. I know a lot of these ideas are going around. Maybe that could be something that gets developed further down the road. But, in the immediate sense, it seems like, hey, there's going to be an app or there's going to be something that tells you, hey, this person's been vaccinated or has not been vaccinated, right? A lot of this comes down to the idea of health surveillance. If we can create apps, if we can create programs, if we can create whatever it is that gathers everybody's data around a lot of things that, might be personal to them, then we can further control, right? We can further have authority over these particular people. And, going back to this, right, what are we seeing here? We're seeing the same idea that people had a long time ago, which was that, hey, they were just going to start denying services, right? Like, so all of your fun might start to go away, bars and restaurants and, sports venues and concerts, right? Potentially travel. All these things might go away in favor of saying, well, no, you need to have a vaccine. And so people were right to sort of feel that this was likely where it was going to go. And, now that we see it happening, we ask the question, it's like, okay, well, why? Why is this happening? What's going on here, right? And we're seeing this overreaching totalitarian, this authoritarian control, this epidemic of control, this obsession over having control over everything. We're seeing this again, as we discussed in the previous video, that we have this worldview that's driving our society as a whole. This worldview that says we need to control everything, right? Our only way to make life quote unquote safe, which is a different thing, that word safe means something different for everybody, right? But when you're an authoritarian or when you're in this position of wanting to control everything, there's no such thing as like enough safety. Right? And so operating from that worldview, you have governments and you have people, supporting and pushing in these ideas that, we need to just keep controlling everything. If we can control this, we can have mass health surveillance. Why not have that, right? This would be hugely valuable to making, statistics and making little numbers that get people to support politics and political policies. This may produce some cool results, right? or not, right? But we've seen so many times the more we try and control something, the more we try and conquer and dominate over something like we have with nature, the more it bites back or the more it starts to fall apart and no longer supports, human life and what we're trying to do here. On top of that, we also see that this whole idea of this obsession over control, this obsession over authoritarianism also creates a life where we're constantly questioning at what cost? What are we giving up, right? What are we giving up to protect, 0.00001% of the population? Or, I think in COVID numbers, if we're just talking about deaths, what are we doing to protect like, don't quote me on this, but I'm assuming it's below 1%, right? Below 1% of the population. Why are we having this massive form of authoritarian control? What about us in our thinking is having a difficult time really figuring out what to do about COVID when it comes to a small group of people that are at higher risk? Why is it that we're okay with what we believe is a short period of time, right? We're okay with locking down or doing something that really isn't helping the situation a whole bunch anyway, but have we not figured out, right? And this is why I'm doing this thing, because this is an exercise. Like as we go and as we have these conversations, these are the types of things we have to figure out as a collective. How do we protect, quote unquote, those people, right? The ones that are at higher risk, and yet not make everybody else have to limit their lives? Because a lot of people believe that, hey, this might only be around for a year or 2 years or whatever it might be, but in all likelihood, this could continue to be pushed further and further. On top of that, what we're seeing is a worldview of mass control, right? Mass hysteria, mass control, mass authoritarianism. COVID is just one of many times we take this same approach to everything. This isn't just about COVID, right? We take this approach to everything. If we don't start working out what is the cause of how we approach these things, then we're going to have a very difficult time figuring out how to solve them. And then, of course, there's the perspective of like, well, there's a group of people, a powerful group of people, or many powerful groups of people that benefit from having more authoritarian control, more, totalitarian measures put in place on society to be able to control society, protect, aspects of their power and aspects of their wealth. If you really look at it, this is true. I mean, the base idea of it is true. Some people's interpretation of exactly what it looks like, who exactly the people are, what their full intentions are, that's all up for debate. That's all something that, we're figuring out. We still don't necessarily know absolutely all the information necessary to be able to make a full-on accurate discussion on this, but we can look at it and say, yeah, powerful people do have an interest in more control, in more totalitarianism, and appear right now to be having discussions that say, well, hold on a second. If we can utilize events, we know that events have been used in the course of history. Even if just basic history that's taught in school, we know that certain events, or what we call false flags, or what we call, taking advantage of a real situation where we seed ideas to the public that then make them say, hey, well, yeah, we do need more war. We do need more money spent on military and that sort of thing, which gives profit to specific people and puts other countries or other groups of people into positions of oppression or those sorts of things, right? Like this worldview of conquering everything, of controlling everything, is a huge part of how we're approaching COVID and how we approach a lot of these different things. And we can't just say here as people that, well, it's only those authoritarian, totalitarian people that are doing things like that in this world, that are operating from this worldview. This is also happening at a everyday person level. I see people all the time, right? Even activists who don't want mandatory vaccines. I see them obsessed over control. I see them wanting to be able to have, control over other people, manipulate other people, mislead other people, right? And it's not like they have like these bad, evil intentions. There's something about us, there's something deep down within us that has these deep-seated fears, this deep-seated survival mentality that says, hey, we're here to compete with everybody, and it's survival of the fittest, right? We got to make sure that, me and my family is taken care of first, right? We have these ideas, but If we take a second and we stop and we breathe and we disconnect and we just go within a little bit and we ask, like, where do these things come from? Like, where does this perspective come from that everything is about us trying to fight, us trying to, survive something that is constantly trying to kill us, right? Where does this come from? It's the overwhelming worldview that operates within our society that doesn't believe that we can relate with nature, that we can support each other, that we're actually here as a global community, and we can, under the right ideas, under the right beliefs, under the right worldviews, we can collaborate, we can be peaceful. But if we're always taking this approach of, well, hey, let's fight everything, of, hey, let's control everything, of every problem that comes up, let's cancel it. Every trigger word that somebody says, well, hold on, you're not allowed to say that, right? Even what I'm saying right now is probably triggering a group of people who believe that, well, hey, what you're saying right now, you should be addressing the core issue, which is we need to go fight and kill the people at the top right now because they're imposing all these ideas. If we were to do that, we were to be operating from the same way of thinking that they're operating from. So when they're dead, what then happens to the people that killed them? They become the people in a position of power, and they start to do exactly what the old worldview was doing to begin with. And next thing you know, nothing will have changed in our society, right? There's a lot of activists that I've met, that I've hung out with, that I've had deep conversations with over the last 11, 12 years, who I say, wow, I'm not sure that this person is going to create a beautiful, peaceful society. I feel like this person's very angry and very resentful and very wants revenge. And I don't think they see a connection between people. I don't feel like they're coming from a different space about who we are, why we're here, and the type of world they want to create. I feel like they're coming from a space where it's like, wow, they just still want to fight. They still have the old world view in hand. It's just they don't want to be on the side of oppression. But slowly but surely, they might tiptoe onto being the side of the oppressor. Right? And this is why I say it's like, sometimes I feel, because when we're talking about how to resist, for example, this idea of vaccination and this idea of, okay, well, limiting people's view of things. And there's like, well, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And I think the challenge is it's like part of the reason why everyone's having a very difficult time, what do we do about it? Right? Is there are certain measures, certain policies, certain things, certain actions people are taking that I'm going to mention here that I think are actually pretty interesting. There's people that are looking at law. They're looking at natural law versus, the man-made laws that we have right now that kind of are discussing this idea of, hey, well, you're basically turned into a corporate entity, and when you consent with the laws at hand, it's your actual straw man person that is playing within this, but you as a natural person actually have different rights. You have law. These laws don't necessarily affect you. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't use force against you to still impose those laws. It means that if enough people were maybe to come together and do this, right, you might gain more natural law power, right? And so when I see these groups forming that are trying to hold accountable people in positions of power, saying, hey, you know what, if you do this, it actually goes against, these other aspects of law that most people don't quite understand yet. I see that as an interesting solution, as an interesting way to try and peacefully bring about a resistance that says, well, hey, we're not really resisting. We're opting out of what you're doing. We're opting out of the game that you're playing. We don't want to play that game anymore. And so here are the ways by which, in numbers, we'd be able to opt out of that. And I think these are very valuable discussions to have right now, right? As we are saying, hey, we have a problem that's here. And we need some action to be taken now that kind of allows us to go, okay, well, what do we do right now? Right? What's the immediate need? The immediate need is, okay, well, let's inform ourselves. Let's get educated. Let's see what we can do about potentially serving some notice of liabilities or potentially learning about how we can opt out of these measures that are coming into place that we don't really feel comfortable with, that we feel might be overstepping bounds. But there's also another immediate need. And that immediate need is to say, what is my state of being? What is my state of thinking? What is my worldview that I'm holding right now? And is it perhaps what has helped, create the world that we see today on a collective level? And is it perhaps that it's our level of thinking, it's our way of being, it's our way of perceiving our reality, who we are, why we're here, and where we want to go, that needs to change to truly solve the global problems that we have, or the challenge that we perceive, right? When we look at it from this standpoint of like, if you were in a house fire, or if you were, if your water was flooding into your house or something like that from a pipe, you'd be able to see, okay, well, the water's flooding in my house, or the fire, my house is on fire. Okay, if I have a fire extinguisher or a fire hose, or if I can clog that leak, boom, I solved it, right? But when we have issues that are on a global level, right? We have global issues, and people will ask, us all the time, and people will ask other people, and there's these conversations, what do we do? What do we do to solve the challenge that we have? What do we do to stop the authoritarian control, all this stuff that's happening? And it feels like nobody can come up with a solution that just does it all. And it's because it involves the way we think. It involves the way that we're being. It involves something deeper than just a physical action that seeks to conquer a problem. When we have that view, we never understand the real deep underlying problem. The real deep underlying problem with vaccinations and what's going on can't be solved just by saying, well, no, all these people that disagree and that think that, people should be forced to get a vaccine, they're all idiots. We have a huge portion of the population that is believing the COVID narrative that is being presented by the mainstream media. It doesn't mean that they're sheeple. It doesn't mean that they're bad. It doesn't mean that they're stupid. It means that something about them is not questioning what's going on around us, right? And if most of the time when I have a conversation with these people and I say, hey, what's going on? What do you believe this? What about this is making you believe this? And they present what they feel, right? And then I present some other ideas or some other information that has the same level of credibility, and they go, well, that's interesting. Yeah, I can't actually quite put together, I guess, what the truth is. It's hard, but part of me is really struggling at the idea that the government would be wrong with this, that they'd be so off, right? And of course, another group of people would look at that response and go, you naive idiot, your government hates you. And I go, well, you're not helping anything by saying that, right? Because that person is presenting to you their core challenge, which is that within their worldview, that within the idea that the whole story of life is built upon, right? They're having a difficult time moving past this idea that government may not be operating in my best interest. So there's probably a fear there that says, what would happen without government? What would happen if I couldn't trust what government and mainstream media said? And they're not yet willing to face that, or they haven't yet faced that. So what's better? To keep smashing those people with insults and with like, look, here's another fact, and another fact, and another fact, right? To keep smashing those people with that, or to say, hold on a second, what this person's going through is a complete shift in their worldview. Something about what's going on is changing within them. And unless we can speak with them on that level, we're not solving anything, right? You can't just say, well, hey, we just got to fight and resist and all this stuff is bad. Because there's a whole group of people who are going to say, why are all these people fighting and resisting? Like, are they conspiracy theorists, right? It's like there's the war on conspiracy right now, on the idea that, hey, there's conspiracies that happen in our world, which there absolutely is conspiracies that happen in our world. But the war that's going on between those cultures is not, hey, the awakening people fighting the asleep people. It's that these people are questioning something, right? The people that are saying, hey, I realize there's conspiracy, and they're questioning something, and their worldview is starting to change. And sometimes a lot of emotion and a lot of anger comes, right? And that's great. That's a response that tells us, hey, what's going on within ourselves? There's so many things we can talk about there. We'll save it for another video. But if that anger goes unchecked, or if it doesn't get integrated, it becomes the force, or, again, going from power versus force, which is ideas that have been put forth by, I believe, Dr. Richard Hawkins is his name. But, this idea of force then becomes the worldview of how to fight the other side. We got to go aggressive and force them. And what I'm saying here is, where's the power, right? Because this other side's doing the same thing. Well, these people are disagreeing with us, so we got to go by force. We got to censor them. We got to forcefully censor them. But where's the power? The power is when you empower, when you come together and you say, hold on a second, from a wiser perspective, if I take a breath And I go, why is somebody really accepting the measures that are being put in place, or the idea of limiting life based on, you don't have a vaccine, you can't do this, right? Where does that really come from? Because the elite and these people, or whatever, these people that might be passing down these decisions, is a small group of people. There's still a much greater conversation to have about all the people that are supporting these ideas, that are buying these ideas. They can only buy them from a certain state of being. And so we have to be able to explore that. We have to be able to ask people the deep questions. Why are we really, what about you is really accepting this idea? So asking people, why do you think that there's such differing opinions about what's going on with COVID? And they might say, well, it's because people believe fake news or something. They believe in conspiracy theories. And he's like, well, hold on. Let's look at some information that's available, right? And we talk about it and we go, okay, so what do you think of this? Well, I don't know. Maybe this is complicated, or maybe this is all biased science. And when you keep working through, right? This is personal transformation. When you keep working through with people and you empathize with them and you love them from a position of accepting where they're at in this moment in their life, right? And you're not seeing them as an enemy, which is our worldview right now, is everybody who disagrees with us is an enemy, and we must silence them and we must go against them, as opposed to saying, why are you really doing this? What's going on? And talking with people on this level, making this the culture, making this the means by which we say, how do we have conversations? So when we decide, if we decide as a collective to resist this idea of, no, you can't say we're not allowed to do this and this and this because of a vaccine, because this business, that business, that business, that business, that business is going to decide to just let people in anyway. Not because they're fighting against the government, because they said, that's not my story here. That's not my worldview. These people want to come and enjoy my food. They're going to come and enjoy my food. And that's okay, right? And those who, are maybe at more risk, if this virus was so dangerous, right? Those who are at more risk, we're going to deal with them as a community. At the beginning of COVID, we saw people, hey, I'll pick up groceries if you're elderly and don't want to go to the store. And I thought to myself, wow, that's beautiful, right? Is that not a way of potentially serving the small, tiny portion of people that are at risk here? We could serve them, we could care for them, as opposed to telling everybody, stay in your house. There's a terrible virus trying to kill you. And this narrative doesn't align with the reality. And people are starting to figure that out. And people are starting to become conspiratorial because they're going, I don't understand. What I'm being told doesn't align with the reality. So why is this happening? And if you ask deep enough questions and you go beyond just the theory, the idea that there's people that are just trying to oppress and control you, which is partly true. But you go beyond, you go deeper and you say, why do we even accept this stuff? What about us is accepting this stuff? And how do we then provide a solution to this challenge that doesn't just put more people into positions of power who are eventually going to just create the same authoritarian control all over again? Why do we see authoritarian control in communism, in capitalism, in democracies, in dictatorships? We see the same totalitarian control because it's not about the systems. It's about the worldview. It's humans and the way we think right now. It's the way we try to conquer. It's the way we try and control everything. These are the deep stories that we need to ask. And the ways to look for this and the ways to explore this stuff and find out whether or not it's true is to explore your your individual traumas, to explore your individual emotional beliefs around things, to dig into your belief systems and say, why do I have this belief about the world? Where does this come from? And is it actually true the majority of the time? Or is it only true in some particular cases? And then I use that to say, well, the whole world's dangerous and terrible, right? Is nature really here as an enemy to us, or is it here to support us? And should we relate to it? How does it feel to relate deeply with other people and with nature versus to live in a separate, I'm here in my neighborhood or in my home, and I don't even know my neighbor, and I don't even know, and we have all this disconnection, this massive collective separate game we have going on where everybody is separate from one another, right? These stories play into this vaccine conversation in a way that is so evident Yet we're here going, well, no, this is only about government is corrupt or these people are bad. And we can look at it that way, but if we want to solve our issues on a deeper level and really not have them just keep repeating over and over and over again, right? Like, oh, Monsanto, we found out that DDT was bad and they got, oh, okay, we won't use that anymore, but what are we still doing? After we exposed all that and got rid of it, right? What are we still doing? We're still allowing Monsanto and Bayer and all these people destroy the entire food supply, right? Provide more pharmaceuticals, some of which are absolutely maiming people, right? Destroying gut health, destroying all these, because why? Because we're not solving the issue by just spotlighting one issue. What caused that issue, right? What is the deep cause of that issue? Again, going back to yesterday's conversation, the way we view our lives, the way we create our economies, the way we uphold our economies, the way we then say, well, this economy is the number one thing that drives our society. Unfortunately, this economy is not in relationship in a meaningful and deep, harmonious way with human beings, with thrivability, with environmental thrivability. It's not in relationship with that. It's on its own. And it says, this is our God, right? Well, what causes us to even believe in an economy like that? Well, what about us thinks that the only way for us to organize, the only way for us to meaningfully do anything is by all competing with one another for a little piece of the pie? These are deep stories that we have to question if we want to deeply solve problems. And my proposition is that we're entering into a time that could be a 3, 4, 5-year phase where, yeah, we might have to address some immediate needs and say, let's educate ourselves, let's raise awareness, let's see what's going on, let's find ways to potentially, loosely resist, but it all has to be within a container of deeply questioning our worldviews, of being willing to drop the urgency, drop the panic, right? Like, I don't feel urgency or panic right now. I'm not terrified. I deeply know that these are the conversations that we need to have. And that if we operate from this point of view and we start actually questioning things and we gain clarity within our minds and within our beings about what to do, we're going to start to figure things out. We're going to start to know where to go and what to do. And things are going to open up. Things are going to change on a level that we can't maybe perceive when we're in this sort of clinical, let's just pick an issue and fight it point of view. Right? There's different ways to look at this. So that's kind of what I wanted to have a conversation on today. And again, I know there's, potentially a lot of, oh, this is so naive, this is that. I've been through that. I've been through that conversation many, many, many times, right? I've been doing this work for 11 years, sharing the same message for 11 years, right? It always comes back to this. It always comes back to there's a deeper conversation that needs to be had, and it needs to start pushing into society. It needs to start pushing into culture. Because if we're always just trying to solve it in the old ways, and you really take an audit of the same thinking that we're applying to solving our problems now is how we've applied it for centuries. And yet we're still here. So did it work? Maybe it's time for something new.